Good afternoon, everyone. I know this session is just after lunch, so we'll try to ask tough questions so that you want to know the answers for it. And I hope everybody stays awake. And just I hope that people who came knows that we are not going to talk about SOC 2, but SOC, which is Security Operations Center. So yeah, I think we have been introduced, and just one announcement: we will take questions towards the end, because we have come up with a flow for asking questions, and we want to take you through a journey on how the SOC has been 10 years back, how it is currently, what are the current challenges, and how it will evolve in the future. So the idea is to just take you through the journey, nostalgic, and then what are the challenges, and we will have last 10-15 minutes for the question. So let's go with the first question, and mostly about, because everybody has their own implementation of Security Operations Center, and everybody thinks that, hey, my SOC is mature. But before we go into that, I don't want the NIST definition of SOC, but what is your interpretation of Security Operations Center and what it means for everyone? Sweta, you go first.
Yeah, thank you. SOC in any organization is considered as first line of defense. And obviously, there is an expectation that SOC should be able to detect attacks, malicious activities at a very early stage in the entire attack phase. To give you an example, SOC is something similar to what you can call as airport security at all the airports. So if you guys have ever watched on National Geographic, there's a program that comes on airport security where the airport security team watches each and every passenger who passes through the customs. And their job is only to identify, out of millions of passengers, those 3 or 4 passengers who might be doing drug trafficking, smuggling, etc. And that's the thought process which I think we can use in the SOC, so that we can identify the threats or the malicious activities early on, and make sure that we have a secure environment in the organization. So that's my definition of SOC.
Yugi, you want to add your, you have been a veteran in SOC side, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I know you mentioned we should mention NIST, CSF, but I'm going to just use that definition. So for me, the detect, respond, recover aspects is SOC. And I totally agree with Shweta, we are the first line of defense. And my example is similar to hers, like airport security. I like medieval fantasy movies. So, they show the old castles and fort and 2 guys standing in front of the gate, letting people in and identifying people who are not. So I think that's tier 1 SOC. But SOC is pretty much, I feel like, it's much, much wider. Like I said, detect, respond.
Yeah.
Recover.
I will hold my thought, because when somebody says airport and security, 9 level comes into mind. 9/11 was a kind of a moment where everything changed. Has there been such a moment on the security operations side? But for later. But we will go to Vivek first.
Yeah, sure. For us, right, I'm looking at it from a product perspective. SOC is twofold, right? One is how we are protecting our infrastructure, and there it is more like, how do I collect all the information from every place? How do I consolidate that, and how do the incident response happens on a timely manner, right? So that's something that constantly happens. And then as a product, that how we provide to a customer as a managed service, where it happens that we collate the incidents happening across customers, and then see how things are evolving, what are the patterns, what are the anomalies evolving, and then how do we respond faster, right? This is how we treat SOC. One from customer's perspective, providing a managed solution, having a strong SOC team, looking at how various things are working and what are the various incidents happening across customers, and how do you correlate it and respond quickly, right?
So, cause you are at it, and we are discussing. So, I know everybody loves a story, right? If you have to just give me some incident or some stellar moment on the operations side which you recall, or what has been your...
See, just looking at recent examples, right? What happened when, say, the war started, right? And Ukraine war started and other things. Incidentally, you started seeing lot of attacks happening across both, just not Russia. It's both Russians and Ukraine there were a lot of attacks that was coming in, right? So we had to look at it and then improve the response and then improve the threat levels for requests coming from these areas. So those are the things that immediately bubbles up if you have a strong SOC system in place and there's a strong monitoring in place and ability to handle anomalies at a scale.
Yeah.
I'll just add to what he said. So this is an example of situational awareness. And when this whole war started, I remember connecting to my business partners at Microsoft, Google, Palo Altos. I told them my problem statement is twofold, okay, because India is considering to abstain from taking a decision, and Russia is a friend of India. At the same time, US, Europe is also friends of India. So the attacks are getting launched by Russians onto the other side, as well as from the West to the Russia. So India is kind of more or less getting sandwiched in both the, parties. So I have a twofold problem which I need to address. So this is part of situational awareness, which we need to think as part of cyber defense as a whole, information security as a whole, and not just limiting to SOC.
Yeah. So Yogi, maybe a similar question. What is your most aha or stellar moment on your this journey so far, like in the security operations side?
So I think I'll just follow the trend here, since you're talking about war. I got interested in security after I read that book, Stuxnet, the whole thing. So for me, that was just going through that book, I had multiple aha moments, and I decided, this is something which I really want to explore. So since I've been working in this industry, I come from a SRE background. So for me, the biggest, I think, revelation was in SRE, everything is time sensitive. You have to get things up back and running very quickly. But our incidents on the security side are equally intense, but there's a different version of time which comes in, right? You can actually sit back, and sometimes when you know what the attacker is trying to do or you're curious, you just wait sometimes, and which is what was very alien to me when I first got into this side. So I think those things definitely are, aha moments for me.
So I think definitely Stuxnet was a milestone. Those are happening to the industry for quite some time, the Stuxnet, but I think definitely a lot of other incidents in recent SolarWinds and other have been also taking the news, and definitely this Russia-Ukraine war. The most interesting thing which I witnessed, it talks about the preparedness of the cyber side. A lot of people who started targeting Russian servers, the Russians were responding by saying, hey, I am a teapot. And that is HTTP 418 error, saying that, hey, server is so they were able to detect such attack on their infrastructure, and they were trying to mock the people from the other side. So that's the fun thing which I learned with this new one. So so this is about the first introduction around the security operations, what it means, what the panelists have been through, and what is their moments. And so coming to the later part where we want to, everybody is hey, does your SOC sucks? But what are we going to talk about in this? The theme is how do we know that my SOC is mature, or what are the key things to consider to evaluate if my security operations center is at which level of maturity? So that is one question which I have, which will talk about the visibility, the mid-rate TTPs, attack framework, and all that. So Sweta, you want to take a go at it?
Yeah, sure. So one important thing is when you're building a SOC or when you're sustaining a SOC, at whatever stage it may be, visibility is very important. And what I mean by visibility is not just the network level visibility or endpoint level visibility. The business visibility is also important. Okay, your detection rules should ensure that you address the risks that are posed for the business. Okay, because end of the day, I think many of the organizations since many years have started calling cybersecurity risk as one of their business risks. Okay, I remember in my previous organization, 5 years ago, they actually called it into the annual report, saying that these are the top 10 risks the organization faces. cybersecurity is one of the key risks that was identified at that time, right? So visibility from the network point of view, from the endpoint point of view, from the user point of view, location point of view, and business point of view is very important. Many a times what happens is you integrate a lot of infrastructure, you integrate firewalls, you integrate enterprise proxy, but then there is some remote location operating some small business function which nobody has visibility. And that may not be part of your enterprise security control ecosystem. Just to take an example, I have seen these cases where there is a firewall at a particular location. It is a standalone firewall. It is not reporting to a central console. For example, if it's a Palo Alto firewall, the central console of Palo Alto is called as Panorama. So that firewall is not even visible in the central console of the firewall, right? And it's a standalone. How will SOC get that visibility? Because the tools that are used in SOC, primarily the SIM tool, it doesn't have that capability of doing a discovery and identifying the assets in your organization. That's not how it works. So there is some amount of manual intervention which can be solved by having a proper process, interfunctional or interdepartmental process, okay, especially on the new deployments that happen, the new changes that happen, or the existing infrastructure whenever it undergoes a change. It is important that we make sure that the IT organization keeps the security organization, and very specifically the SOC, informed about those changes. So I'll just stop at that and see if we have any
I would like to
comments.
know more about when we say visibility, but what about the auto discovery? Like there definitely have been said OITs and all the other problems. So, but yeah, what's your view about this, Yogi?
So I agree with Shweta, mostly with what she said about visibility. So maturity doesn't come in one day, right? It takes a while to get to a certain stage. So I think every company is in a different stage of maturity. How we define maturity in SOC, we have a lot of frameworks, which, give you a good idea on, MITRE ATT&CK framework, and you can use scenarios from that. But one area, and I think I heard someone say this, so I'm paraphrasing, but the question is not if some company is going to be breached, it's when. It's just a given at this point, right? So I think the maturity which I think about it ways how many levels or layers of protection you can build in, and visibility is definitely one of the key aspects of that. There's a whole plethora of things we can think of. In our case, we have, we focus a lot on process, people, technology. So when I talk about process, it's about, run books, doing tabletop exercises, doing all of that things. And people, obviously, we want to invest in skills and training. And so it's, it's the whole gamut of things. You just have to do it. And the best thing to evaluate how mature your firm is to, either get someone from a third party or external company like Mandiant or something to come and, benchmark you. So that gives you a good sense of maturity.
Sure. Vivek, you want to add?
Yeah. From our perspective, right, how we look at maturity is, and from the SOC perspective, right, it is about visibility, collecting information, then consolidating it, and then the most important part is about the response, right? How quickly are you able to respond? And nowadays, just response is not enough. Reporting is also becoming mandatory. So how mature are you on that front, right? You have compliance mandates where you have to report incidents in very timely manner. So how are you looking at it in a holistic manner, right? And which stage of the maturity level are you in? And from where we see it in the industry, it's more like people are good at visibility side of things. I mean, they are getting there. The reporting side is also getting there, but the response part, right? That's where, the challenges still remain.
Yeah. So maybe I also want to have an audience poll sort of thing, just a show of hands. So how many of you have seen the MITRE ATT&CK framework being implemented and somebody actually mapping the TTPs and hey, do we have security controls in place and being followed in your own organizations diligently?
Wow, that is a good number. What is the current MITRE ATT&CK version?
That's a trick question.
That is to the audience. 11. How many tactics are there? How many say
Father,
12?
we are hiring right now.
How many say 12? Okay, 1, 2, 14. Who said 14? 1. Okay, now everybody's saying 14. Okay, so there are 14 because from the version 9 onwards, the pre-attack and the attack matrices have been merged. So that's how you have 14 tactics. How many techniques? Any guess? More than 150, okay. Too low. Exact number is 222.
So
That's version 11. So now you cannot have the detections across all these tactics and techniques in your SOC. SOC currently in many cases is a reactive function. Only if it gets the signals, it can build correlation rules and identify those signals as malicious, right? So most of the rules that you build in SOC are static, condition-based, where you define a threshold. Okay, X number of failures in X minutes, just a simple example, right? And therefore, it is important to understand that if you say that I have implemented MITRE ATT&CK framework, it does not necessarily mean you have implemented detection across all the 222 techniques. And it is, even MITRE says in their FAQ that it is not possible to cover all the 100 because of various reasons. If you're an 100% on-prem organization, there are tactics, techniques which are specific to cloud environment. You just cannot implement it. If you don't have certain security controls implemented, for example, if you don't have an endpoint DLP or a network DLP, those specific tactics and techniques associated with, let's say, data exfiltration, you may not be able to build rules around it because you don't have the security control to throw those signals into the SIM. Yeah.
So you were actually like caught me ahead. So because we are at Nullcon, I was like more curious about also from maturity perspective. Like we have script queries, we have internal blue teams, we have purple team, red team, and we have APTs. So if I'm talking about SOC preparedness and detecting this sort of things, so maybe a mid-level mature SOC, what do you think? Like what sort of attacks we will be able to detect at least?
I think we all must get our basics right. Okay. You have a firewall. It's an internet-facing firewall or a perimeter firewall, as it is also called. And you have a rule on that firewall, any. What does any stand for? Anybody? What does that mean? What is any? Excellent. Source, destination, services, or ports. Okay. If you're having such kind of a rule on your firewall at an enterprise firewall, internet-facing firewall, then obviously you will have a lot of attacks coming your way. Your firewall will be flooded with events. Okay. Second important thing is you're not enabling logging itself on your machines. Okay. This typically happens in the server environment. Typically on the Windows servers, Linux servers, databases, applications, you don't enable OS level logins. Okay. Because of that, you don't get the signals from those servers coming into your SIM. Okay. A lot of people say that, okay, we have implemented domain controller and we can, forward those logs. But then there are local logins created on the servers with administrative privileges, which SOC will not have visibility unless the logging on those servers is enabled and those logs are pushed or pointed to the SIM. And then you build use cases on top of it. So again, I will go back to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. If you have gone through how the MITRE ATT&CK framework is organized, after describing tactics, techniques, and sub-techniques, it also gives a mapping of those to the attack groups. How do you do the detections? What is possible to detect? What is not possible to detect? Okay, it gives a very elaborate way of it basically helps the SOC to understand what is it that they can do and what scenarios they can build, what events they need to collect to address the scenarios and make sure that those detections trigger in the environment.
So Yogi, maybe like you have been seeing also a lot of incidents, and with the new certain directive, you are on the hook. So you want to add like how the preparedness and how ready we are to respond, and maybe like with this new certain directive sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think we already had a certain session earlier, so I won't comment on that. But just to further Shweta's point, right? So you're still talking about maturity, right? Or
yeah, we are still like we can talk about like preparedness. That's what.
Yeah, so I think now we are moving on to there's a lot of different environments we operate into now. Like cloud is a big one. So things change. Everything is evolving. Earlier it used to be IOCs were very important. Now IOAs are becoming very important. Indicators of attack. So like one of the ways MITRE ATT&CK framework is used is it helps you visualize scenarios and then plan according to them. And so the maturity aspect comes in by that, like how well you use these techniques and how well you can predict what's going to happen. So going back to our definition of SOC, right? So now you're bringing in threat intel as well into this whole equation. So all of these things working together is essentially, where we are going with in the future.
Yeah, like if I can add a supplement to that question. So what could be impact of, like, we have seen recently a lot of red team tools being leaked. So how soon you think, like, once that 0-day sort of thing happens, or like red team's tools are getting leaked, how fast we can detect those anomalies? Like, do we wait on the vendor's signature detection, like, to be added to our infra, or like we do something on the fly?
Okay. Yeah. So I think this is going into a different territory, but like we talked about hybrid SOCs like earlier before we were talking before the session. So hybrid SOCs is one way, like, and by hybrid SOC, we mean like, where you have your internal SOC, you may be partnering with external partners like CrowdStrike or some other, vendor who's helping you at the same time. And so, yeah, you have different flavors of that, but one way to prepare for these kind of things, like, SolarWinds, for example, like who would have warned a company that, hey, SolarWinds is coming? So there are a lot of, one of the advantages of hybrid SOC is you can have these relationships which help you better prepare for these kind of things. So like a mid-level mature company might be able to ward off like script kiddies, but a more mature organization might have a hybrid SOC kind of a model.
So I think, Vivek, you want to add something to this?
Not much. I think I agree with what they are saying, right? And it depends. I mean, it's all about, you have different detection techniques. Now then, how do you correlate those, right? And maturity, or how do you respond faster, would come down from, does the SOC team understands the various detection techniques happening? If not, are you asking the vendors to go back and then give the right information for you? And is the different techniques being configured well and all those things, right? It comes down to that, and that's pretty much it.
I'll just take one example here. How many of you remember WannaCry? All of them. Okay. So what was the root cause of WannaCry happening? Somebody said? Missing patches of what? What is Eternal Blue? SMB1 vulnerability. When was the patch released for that vulnerability? March of that year, right? And when did WannaCry actually happen? May, right? So we almost had 1.5 to 2 months to ensure that the patching is done. But then we have various reasons of not doing that patch. And till 2019, there were reports circulating that there are systems which are vulnerable to SMB1. And this is not just Windows machines, but any infra which uses Microsoft's SMB1 in their infrastructure is vulnerable, right? So now how do you make sure that the SOC is able to understand these vulnerabilities and create detections on it? So what does SMB1, what are the ports related to SMB1? Yeah? 443 or 445? 445. Others? 139, 138, 137, right? So what SOC can do is define detection rules for inbound and outbound communication on those ports, very specifically, which are allowed. Okay, and then deny once you can take it on later as part of your additional analysis. So this is the approach when it comes to vulnerability, which is known. You can use it as a detection in the SOC.
So thanks, Sweta, for summing it up. And I also have I also have curiosity. For example, we do a lot of operations and we do a lot of correlation. So one thing with correlation is definitely attributing the incident to any APTs or threat actors but what on the internal side? Like, do we also have something to basically tag identity to the incidents, and how can we know that, hey, who is being targeted inside the organization? Something on that specific threat intel. You want to take that?
Yeah. So, there are threat intel, again, like how you get your intel can vary, based on the size of your company. But if you have like an in-house threat intel team, they should be the ones driving the detection strategy. So, there are a lot of inputs, which can help, but if you want to just have a focused strategy, I think that's a really good way of going about doing it. And the way they do it is, multiple fronts. Like you mentioned the APT actors, but
yeah. So mostly my question is around like Active Directories, that they have been the target for all the actors. Hey, let's get the privileged identity. Like I want an admin access, and then basically you get the keys of kingdom. Maybe you can do a golden attack or roasting, whatever. But if once you have the hold of Active Directory, and then you can simply use that. So maybe Sweta, you want to add something on the identity part?
So basically, we are trying to address two things. One is an external attack gaining access to your valid accounts, which is one of the techniques under 4 tactics of MITRE, and insider threat. Okay, so SIM coupled with UEBA is more likely to give you that insight because UEBA has that very good analytical module. For example, if let's say I'm using G Suite in my organization, okay, or even O365, okay. If you're logging from a compromised device, okay, you get an alert that there is a user login that has happened from a compromised device, okay. If you're logging from multiple locations simultaneously, which are geographically distant locations, you get an alert. That is something which UEBA can, stitch together based on the identity-related events and give that context to SIM to further investigate and, analyze really in depth. So UEBA coupled with SIM, I think, is a great combination to identify such attacks.
Vivek, you want to add anything to this user entity behavior? So yeah, those who have not heard the term, UEBA is entity behavior analysis. So whoever is the user entity, there have been basically when I was doing my engineering, we were talking about anomaly detection and intrusion prevention system, and that thing has definitely come a long way. Maybe we can take as big as this is the current situation where Sweta was saying, hey, there are a lot of static rules still. Like we are talking about which port, a very static binding. Maybe some people change their RDP port from 3389 to something else, or like having run this, not to use the commonly used ports to just have some deception. But where do we see this industry going forward? Like, is that would be like too hard with all the kind of perimeter getting diminished and our workloads are running everywhere on the edge, in the cloud, multi-cloud, and like we have something like hybrid on-prem. So with the boundaries getting diminished where we don't have perimeter, we are looking at zero trust, JTNA sort of, a lot of companies are coming with that approach as well. So where would it be very radical to think like, hey, a world without SOC, like, do you think we can get rid of the security operations center? And because everybody has been talking about AI, ML, blockchain, and all the jargons and zero trust, but will there be soon we can see an AI powered SOC where human intervention is like less than no one. Like this is like a good SOC fighting war with a bad AI bot or something.
So, see, AI ML is something that is like, I mean, I don't want to throw it down, right? But AI ML is there, and it will definitely help in lot of this detection techniques and even automated response, right? But it is a utopian world to think that AI ML is going to like replace the manual intervention, right? I mean, how we see it and how we think about machine learning and everything is machine learning should be used to analyze huge data, right? And ability to analyze which is not humanly possible, but then pass on the anomalies detected or the relations that is identified, but let human be there to respond, right? Or at least decide whether it is right or wrong. I mean, I think you're discussing, and you don't want AI ML to decide whether, okay, for some reason the system is saying that, hey, the CEO's laptop is misbehaving, and then I go and wipe it off, right? That's not something that you want to do, and you don't want such incidents. I mean, coming from an application security perspective, how we see it is even a minute's downtime in an application costs companies, right? And in that cases, you don't want AI ML to kind of, okay, it's seeing a huge surge of data or requests coming from a business area, right? Say from Singapore, and all of a sudden they block Singapore, which is their biggest business centers. So that will cause huge issues, right? So yeah. I don't see AI/ML replacing it. Obviously, it will be complementary.
So I think you are killing like a lot of buzz here. I think so everybody has been selling silver bullets in security industry. Like, hey, my AI/ML solves this problem. Like you definitely killed a lot of buzz.
I'm not killing it. I mean, again, see, there's no silver bullet, right? I mean, the problem with how industry is treating AI/ML is that is the silver bullet which is going to solve everything. I mean, I don't see that happening, very frankly.
Okay.
I'll just add to it. Anybody who is used Azure Sentinel as their SIM in their environments, what is the ML-based rule in Sentinel called? Fusion. So Fusion is ML-based rule which addresses at least 120 different scenarios, which otherwise in a traditional SIM like ArcSight or QRadar, you would have to create either 120 static detection rules or a combination of those 120 use cases. So that is where ML can help. And second thing is human intelligence can never be replaced with artificial intelligence is my personal opinion. I'll give a small I'll give a small example. How many of you know the Dabbawalas from Mumbai? Almost everybody. Now, when their case study was taken up, I think it was in Harvard, if I recollect correctly, they had zero automation, right? Everything is manual process, but a seamless process. So, can you run a SOC without automation? The answer is yes. But to what extent? That is a questionable thing, because it all depends on how big your organization is, how many signals you are getting into the SOC, and how is your attack surface expanding. Okay, so I would say that ML and AI will complement the SOC, but not necessarily replace it. And the human intelligence element is very important. Yeah,
I think the trend which is going on is like, hey, how much logs you are collecting? And I think sometimes the Splunk is the big bet. Like everybody has so much data, like the storage cost has gone, like I feel like I should buy that. But yeah, there has been a different things, but Yogi, you want to take something on like last closing comment before we take any questions on like a world without SOC, how outrageous it is to think?
Like one thing, I'll be without a job, so I don't want to imagine a world without SOC. But I feel, I completely to what Shweta said, right? Like, and what Vivek was saying earlier, there is really no replacement for human intelligence. All the tools and everything are meant to help humans make, informed decisions quicker. We don't want all the noise, so we really do depend on the tools, but not as a replacement. It's more of an addition.
Yeah, I'll convey this message because like there are a lot of companies who are saying that, hey, we can potentially prevent 0 days from happening, use our ML and AI. So
Yeah, otherwise you can expect the robot, the Rajnikant movie.
Terminator.
So let's go back and questions now. The question time. Oh, I see a lot of hands there.
Hello. Hey, hi everyone. A quick query. So recently pandemic happened, it changed the world in many ways, right? So what change did it brought to SOC? Like when I say change in terms of say being remote or remote friendly, and how it changed SOC as an industry, maybe right now or going forward?
So I can take
Please, Yogi,
that, then
take
you
it
can
up,
add. So for us, it was actually a very happy change, like not to take away from the COVID pandemic itself, but because of the work from home, initially it was very challenging because we had to instantly shift to a work from home model. We had to get all the right tools, security aspect of it. But what we saw is one, we got more employee morale boost somehow. We were able to hire more easily because we also operate in night shifts. So people were like, okay, we don't have to commute in the night. We were able to hire more. And I think in general, at least for tier 1 SOC, it made somehow surprisingly a more positive impact to the work environment. Now, I do have the other side of the story also where we hired a lot of people during the pandemic and they are missing out on knowing the team. Like I met Kanna on my team is sitting right here right now. I met him for the first time, but he was hired nearly 2 years ago. So I think that's the downside of this whole thing. But a happy stance was that we did get some positive thing out of that as well.
Yeah, and just to take it forward from there, when the pandemic happened, I was with a different organization, and in our SOC at that time, we already had L2s and L3s, remote access enabled. So it was a matter of quickly enabling that for L1. So from the ways of working, nothing much changed. But what changed is the amount and pressure of work because new technologies got implemented. VPN, which was restricted to maybe few thousands of employees, had to be extended to more than 1 lakh or 2 lakh employees, which means more infrastructure, more events, right? So ingesting those events was a big challenge because we had an on-prem SIM. EPS became a bottleneck, events per second. So we had to increase our licenses, I think. In just 6 months, we renewed our licenses or got additional licenses maybe twice. So there was tremendous amount of work. A lot of servers had to be put in place to address the BCPDR. So again, ingesting log events from that and then making sure that they don't just ingest the logs, but they also reflect in the detection rules. You're ingesting the logs, but whatever you're ingesting is not getting correlated is another problem. So again, a thorough validation of making sure that those infrastructure is part of the rules also. It was a big challenge for us.
We have we'll take a couple of more questions.
Okay. So I think this question started when the pandemic started and laptops and desktops were sent to people's home. The CMDB went for a toss and it continues as on date also that companies are not having a complete CMDB with them. So how is the visibility factor being taken care of by the SOC teams to ensure and help the IT have a complete CMDB? Because InfoSec says IT will do it and IT says how do I do it?
Exactly, that's always a conflict. So, I think one thing is clear as a leader, this is something which I follow is closely connect with the leaders in the IT organization and the people who work on ground. That's very important. So if you connect with a leader at a high level, you will get a high level information. But if you connect with a person who is actually implementing a firewall, you will get more information. Okay, and make your L1s, L2, L3s also connect at the ground level. Once you establish that connect, you can define a proper process, which is the change management process and how InfoSec can get visibility. InfoSec, I think, should be part of all the CAB meetings, at least the emergency and the high or critical severity changes.
Thank you.
I think, please go ahead.
So some of the organizations may have multiple cloud technologies. So how do we protect from APDs? And what are the challenges we are facing when the organization having multiple cloud technologies?
You want to attend?
He's in my team and it's a biased question, so I'll
Yeah, so maybe Sweta, you.
I'll go, like, you know what we are doing. So he's going through a bunch of training. So that's why I think part of the reason of that question. That one thing is obviously you have to, it's not easy. Even though we sometimes say that, you know, all cloud technology is similar, but everything is different. So every single time we onboard something, and that's what we're saying is you have to retrain the person. You have to go through a lot of, tooling training. Folks have to get certified, and it's the same analyst doing that role, handling customer queries and also then trying to figure out, what the attack is going to look like. So I think there is definitely to answer your question, the first question. So there's an increased sense of burnout as well in this scenario. So that's what we experience as well.
Yeah, Sweta, if you want to add in, then we'll just take one last question.
I think when it comes to multi-cloud environment, you can do definitely one thing, use the native tools. For example, AWS has Guard Duty, GCP has Security Center, and Azure also has ASC, Azure Security Center. Now they call it as Azure Defender for Cloud. I think that is something which you can, enable. If you are using Azure predominantly, one good thing in Azure is that you can have something called as Azure Arc, which can cover your workloads in other cloud environments, and you can get those signals in your Sentinel, and then of course the correlation rules which you will have to develop.
So I think there is just one last question in that corner, and then we will wrap up.
Good afternoon. I have sometimes noticed that after implementing SIM in a SOC, the utmost use of it is not implemented. It is just used for logging and as a tool to provide the data for your whatever the data is provided, that is just used. What would your advice be on optimizing the use of a SIM tool, because it is just more than collecting the data over there?
So, I mean, something that we see from our customers also, right? They end up implementing SIM, and then they come back and ask, okay, what is the use case that I should do around this, right? So, I mean, I would suggest that when you are going to implement a SOC and you understand what you are getting into, right? And why you are collecting various data. It's about visibility. Then how do you correlate? You should be able to come up with the use cases that is relevant to your business. And as it was pointed out in the beginning, it should be looked from the business risk perspective, right? Security is no more just a thing that technologies are talking about. It's a boardroom discussion. So from that point of view, what is it and what are the use cases that is relevant to the business? That has to be decided, and right data has to be collected and correlated. That's probably the problem there, where people collect data for probably a compliance reason, or somebody is telling them to do it, and then they are like, okay, what should I do with it? That's probably.
I'll just add one point. Always remember, SIM is not a dumping ground of logs. Okay, you need to understand why you are implementing SIM. Make sure that the objective of implementing SIM is first addressed, and then the compliance and audit becomes the byproduct because of the implementation.
Okay, I think that's all for this panel discussion. I think we are already waiting for the next one. Yeah, if you have any questions, let's sync up offline, and I hope you had a great one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.